All right, everybody, what's up? Welcome back, Occupy Fantasy YouTube channel, and we're here for UFC 261. Usman versus Masvidal. We got Zhang versus Namajunas, and we got Shevchenko versus Andrade. 3 title fights all on one card, and we're here to give you everything you need to know for this event. So we're going to be here for about 45 minutes. We're going to talk about the 3 title fights, break them down, talk about what they mean for both your low risk and your high risk DFS lineups on FanDuel and DraftKings. We're going to talk about all these newcomers on this card, our breakdowns of them and how to employ them in your DFS lineups. Talk about some fights to target. We'll discuss our favorite low-owned plays for tournaments. And then, of course, we'll give you our favorite bets and our stream parlay of the week. Still looking to hit those. So if you don't know me, I'm Brian Jester at Brian Jester FF on Twitter, co-founder of Occupy Fantasy. I am joined by Jake McIntyre, owner of MMA DFS.com, writer of the Daily Plug at Occupy Fantasy, and at DFS_MMA on Twitter. Jake, what's happening, man?
Not a whole lot, man. What's going on with you?
Not much, dude. Just trying to figure out the optimal strategies here for this event. Lots going on. And again, we'll be here for about 45 minutes. So if you guys have questions, go ahead and ask them in the live chat here on stream. We'll answer them as we talk through all the fights and all of our strategies here as well. So Jake, I want to get your first impressions. You see this 13-fight card, 3 title fights, both from a content producing perspective and a DFS player and better perspective. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, man. These cards are always interesting. You know, I feel like it always seems like it's going to create more possibilities, but in reality, it kind of reduces the amount of possibilities that we have in DFS because just kind of looking at the combinations, you know, I think we were looking at the numbers last time, and about just over 40% of people played 2 5-round fighters, and we're talking about the March 6th card, the most recent 3 5-round fight card. And then like 40% played 3 fighters. So, I mean, right off the bat, you know, like half of the people are sharing like 8 to 12 different combinations. So it actually makes it tougher to get unique. So we got to be a little bit crazier with some of the things we do sometimes, or just kind of figure out what the field's going to do. But I don't know. I think it's definitely interesting, and we can get into that more later into this.
Yeah, so 3 title fights. Let's start here with what this means for DFS. And you and I discussed a lot, and I'm personally invested this week because the Knockout King on DraftKings, the online final, starts this week, and I'm not much of a low-risk player, but I have been playing some, and you and I have been talking a lot because I got to get these lineups right for tonight's event. And for those of you out there playing cash games, especially on DraftKings, Jake, we talk about fight stacking, the main event. In your low-risk contest, 50-50s, double-ups, head-to-heads, that's it. Fight stacking when there's 1 title fight. You know, how much fight stacking is too much when there are 3 title fights on the card? Because there's a fine line between trying to guarantee some victories in our lineups, but also limiting the amount of winners we can actually have.
Right. I mean, we were talking a lot about that, you know, trying to figure out if you have 3 losers in your lineup, can you still hit in cash? And I mean, it would probably depend, you know, if you have Shevchenko and Usman in that lineup and they both score 150, obviously it's going to be different than if they score 100. But yeah, I mean, it's a fine line because, I mean, last time we were looking at the cash line, it was right around 460 points. So if you have 3 losers, you're going to need your 3 winners to really, really go crazy to hit that. So, I mean, really, you don't want to just immediately give up, you know, 2 spots, and you definitely don't want to immediately give up 3. So, I mean, we were kind of talking back and forth about a 3-1 stack, possibly a 3-2 stack. I think that's going to be pretty popular kind of in the industry this week, is going to be leaving out Masvidal and then putting in 1 more fighter and rolling with 5 of them. So I think potentially, you know, depending on the contest, you could just look at 3-1 and leave off Andrade. But I don't know. It's a fine line. I mean, what are you thinking on that?
So I think it depends on the contest you're playing and the competition, right? If you and I were just to play some rando off the street in DraftKings head-to-head, we would just, you know, stack 5 fighters from the main event, fit in a mispriced fighter for our 6th slot, and probably beat this random person off the street, you know, 70-80% of the time. But if you're in a large field double-up 50-50, if you're in the Knockout King like I am, if you're playing head-to-heads against better opponents, you know, you're really limiting your upside, which obviously we talk about floor in low risk contests as well, but you need to have some upside as well. So I really do think if you're playing a little bit tougher competition, you're playing head to heads, you're playing maybe triple ups, then I think 3-1 is the best way. So 3 fighters from the main events, 1 underdog is probably the best, because if you fight stack, and if you put 2 underdogs plus 3 favorites, Jake, I mean, you can't afford for the underdogs to get KO'd immediately, right? They got to put up 20, 30 points to help, raise that floor of your lineup. So I think in the end here, we talk about probably a 3-1 stack being the best. We do think 3-2 will be super popular, especially amongst pros. What about FanDuel? It's a little bit different, obviously, with the cheapest title fighter only being $15 there.
Yeah, so FanDuel is completely different. They priced down a bunch of 3-round favorites this week. So there's like tons of value, whereas the underdogs in the main event are $15, $17, and $16. I mean, you have favorites on the FanDuel slate for 3-round fights that are $15. So I think on FanDuel, you're just looking for the value in the 3-round fighters, and I'm not really looking to stack. I mean, maybe stack the Namajunas fight, but I don't think you really need to stack the main events on FanDuel and cash.
Yeah, I agree, just based on the price. And again, this all depends on the site that you're playing on. All right, let's pivot to tournaments. I know a lot of our listeners and OccupyFantasy.com members out there have tickets to the big GPPs on both sites. Jake, I know you have some tickets on DraftKings at least, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. On both sites.
That's what's up, man. So a lot of people are going to be in bigger GPPs than they normally play. And Ken has a question in the chat, and this can probably kick it off for us, because the key to winning big in MMA DFS, one, you have to limit the number of people you tie with, and kind of as a branch off of that, you have to have at least 2 low-owned fighters that you have to nail in your lineups. So Ken asks, is it possible to have a unique lineup if you start your lineup with the 3 title favorites? What do you think, Jake?
I think that's tough, man. There's really not that many combinations. I'm just kind of pulling it up right now. I mean, so if you do the 3 favorites, you're left over with an average of just under 7,400 for your final 3 spots. There's really not that many combinations when you consider that 3 of the people below that are, in the 5-round fight, so you can't play them. I don't know, man. I don't think 3 favorites is the way to go. I think that there's so few combinations that they're all going to be owned, so you definitely can't be unique, and it's unlikely to be the highest scoring. So that's not the approach I would take to start lineups.
Yeah, I agree with you. So if we are, we're making tournament lineups. So Jake, what do you think is the optimal approach? You hinted at it when we first started the show about what we know the field has done in previous 3 title fight cards. What do you think the field's going to do again tonight? And what do you think the best lineup construction pivots are away from that?
Yeah, so I was starting to get into it, but I kind of wanted to, get the show started. So last time, you pulled these numbers. It was 41% of the field had 2 5-round fighters, 37% of the field had 3, 17% of the field had 1, and then it was just 3% of the field completely faded them all, and 2% of the field stacked one of those, which that's not the way to go. So just to simplify, let's say 40% of the field is going to play 3, 40% of the field is going to play 2. If you have 3 fighters, there's 8 combinations, and one of those is all 3 dogs. That's not going to be owned very much. So 7 combinations, you're looking at the DraftKings big tournament, that's going to be like 2,000 lineups per combination. So, and that's half your lineup. So you have 3 spots, and you're competing with 2,000 other people to try to be unique in 3 spots. That's definitely tough. So I kind of like dropping down to 2, where at least then you have 12 possible combinations. So it's going to be a little over 1,000 lineups on average per combination. So that immediately gets cut down in half. I think there's ways that 1 hits if the Weili Namajunas fight ends up being a lower scoring decision. If Shevchenko gets another mid-round finish that doesn't score great, then I could see a way where just Usman is in the optimal lineup. And then you're only competing with about 17% of the field at that point. So that's sort of interesting. So I'm kind of looking at 1 or 2. I love some 3, but I think the 1 favorite, 2 dogs, and the 2 favorites, 1 dog are both going to be really popular. And there's just not that many combinations. It's tough. You're going to have to leave a decent amount of salary left over. But with that said, the last time we had one of these cards, which was just over a month ago, they played 3 5-round fighters, and we had a unique winner. They left $800 on the table, I think is the key. You got to leave some salary left over.
And the other key from that winner was it was two dogs, one favorite. The controversial Sterling decision or disqualification. Jan Blachowicz got the win. So if you wanted to play 3 5-round fighters, the best bet for leverage is 2 underdogs and 1 favorite. But again, very unlikely. I'm kind of on board with you, Jake. I think 2 is the best move here because in the previous 3 title fight cards that we've seen in DFS, the optimal lineup has had 3 title fight winners, but again, it's a very small sample. And we did see one slate. It was the Davison Figueiredo slate where there was 2 title fights, and he was left out of the optimal. So there are possibilities, and I don't think the history completely shows what's possible. So I agree with you, Jake. I think the best approach is probably 2 title fighters in your high-risk DraftKings and FanDuel lineups, and if you want to get crazy, 2 dogs, 1 favorite. So, Jake, we talked a lot about the lineup construction part, and for those of you just tuning in, if you like what you hear so far, make sure you click that subscribe button below the video, get access to all of our videos as soon as they're released here on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up if you like it. And we do want to hear your opinion, so comment below with who you think is going to be the highest scoring fighter on this slate. Not in the live chat, but comment on the actual video who you think is going to be the highest score. So, Jake, you write the Daily Plug. You obviously break it down at MMADFS.com. Quickly, since we've talked about lineup construction so much so far, your brief thoughts on how each of these 3 title fights play out tonight.
Yeah, so I mean, we've already seen Usman and Masvidal fight once, so we probably have the best idea how that one's going to go. I mean, I don't see Masvidal winning that fight. Give me Usman, whether it turns into a striking contest or the same as last time where he just grapples him for, 2/3, 3/4 of the fight. I think Usman takes that, puts up a big score, especially on DraftKings. He's a lot safer there with control time. So, I mean, I'm not going to spend much time talking about that. Easy play, lock in Usman, best play on the slate, whatever. Everyone knows that. Looking at the other 2, I think Shevchenko is going to be under-owned, and I actually really like her to get a sub here. I'm picking the round 2 sub. I got that earlier in the week at plus 3,000. I think that's a really good value. I think Andrade is takedown defense is kind of fraudulent. It shows up at like 76%. Hasn't really been tested by anyone good. And back when she was fighting at 135 pounds, she was getting taken down really easily. So I think people are going to be way too heavy on her. I think Shevchenko is going to be under-owned and has the potential to really hit her ceiling here. I think she's kind of a counter striker. So having someone like Andrade that's going to come in, just like swinging at her, I think that's the perfect matchup. And then if it does get sticky, she can just take it to the ground. So I love Shevchenko here. And then the other fight's sort of interesting. I kind of think it's going to go to a decision, honestly, with Namajunas potentially winning. I'm not necessarily picking her for the upset, but I do think she's a tough opponent to finish. So I kind of see that one going to a decision. And I don't think it's going to be as high volume as Weilei's last fight, which was like a record-setting fight. So, I mean, that kind of shows you the ceiling. And she still didn't go completely crazy in that because, it was basically all striking for her. So, I mean, I think either one could win that, but I don't see it being an explosion spot. So if I have to leave one out, that's going to be the fight that I'm leaving out. And I don't mind playing Namajunas as an underdog. I think she has a high floor. I mean, watch her get knocked out in like 10 seconds now. But I think she has a good floor. Even if she loses a decision, she could score like 50 points. I mean, which I'm not saying that's good, but it might not completely ruin you. It's going to be hard to win at that point, but you could still finish in the top 10%, still have a decent return. And I think she could win. And if she wins a decision, even if it's not a crazy score, she's so cheap on DraftKings at 7,200, and we don't have a ton of dogs we like, that I think she could be in play. But I don't know. I'm not necessarily calling for the upset. I just think it goes to a decision. So, I mean, those are kind of my thoughts on the 3 5-round fights.
Yeah, and you talked about Thug Rose's high floor, and that's a big reason why she's going to be one of the most popular cash game plays, most popular low-risk plays, especially on DraftKings, because of that high floor likelihood of going to a decision. And I totally agree with you on the Shevchenko fight. If you look at our projected ownership, you know what? Let's pull it up in the model here. And for those of you who aren't aware, our MMA Occupy model ranks every fighter on the slate at OccupyFantasy.com for both FanDuel and DraftKings with projected ownership. Jake provides the DraftKings projected ownership. We provide the FanDuel projected ownership. And if you look at the DraftKings projected ownership, which I have just sorted in the model, we have Shevchenko projected for 34% and Andrade projected for 28%, despite Shevchenko being a minus 455 favorite, and Andrade being plus 350. So, Jake, I'm seriously considering, I haven't finalized my lineups yet, but I'm considering, given this difference in ownership between the favorite and the underdog, I I am pretty sure I'm going to completely exclude Andrade from my tournament lineups just because I think she's going to be over-owned compared to Shevchenko, and I'll be over on Shev just because of all the things you've talked about in this ownership difference.
I think that makes a lot of sense, man. Honestly, I know you've always been a big fan of Andrade, so that makes me more comfortable fading her too, because I've been pretty light on her as well. I don't know. I mean, it's hard. You look at her; she's got a huge ceiling. She's got a ton of KOs, but that's what's going to suck everyone in. That's why her ownership is so high, and she's the cheapest fighter on the slate. So I think that a lot of people are going to get trapped on that one, and it's going to be a tough fight for her to win. I mean, she historically has not been very good in title fights. Like, her one win came against Namajunas on a slam. That's the only title fight she's won, and she's lost the, I think, other two that she's been in. So I think it's a great fade on Andrade.
She was losing that fight before the slam too, right? Or am I mistaken there?
Yeah. No, she was. She was down on strikes. It was like 55-47 or something, somewhere around there in the second round. I mean, Rose was beating her, and then Andrade just kept going for the slam, and
I got it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the slam is like the perennial nerve, with O'Malley. It's like, yeah, if you can practice that and get good at slamming someone on their neck and knocking them out, sure, you're going to be great. But good luck with that,
Right. Exactly. So this that's interesting to me. This again, I don't want to harp on this fight too much, but again, getting these title fights right is so important, especially for tournaments. If you look at the last 3 title fight card, we had Amanda Nunes, who was the highest price fighter on the DraftKings slate. Megan Anderson was, for whatever reason, steamed that day in the betting markets, but the salary difference were basically the same. Nunes was minus 1,100 compared to Shevchenko was minus 455. But Nunes was, I don't have the ownership off the top of my head, but 50+% owned, and Anderson was just 10% owned. So it's crazy to me to see, although there's a smaller money line here, it's still minus 455. That's not small at all, to see Andrade still getting that kind of love. But I think it speaks to what you said earlier and what Ken is asking here in the chat. What do we think about these guys in the lower 7K range? The fact that there aren't that many high upside underdogs to begin with is another reason why people are gravitating towards Namajunas and Andrade, just because they're not comfortable with any of these other guys. So Ken points out guys like Sekulic, Vargas, Connolly. What are your thoughts on these guys, Jake? And we'll talk about these guys later, but just quick thoughts on that lower 7K range on DraftKings.
Yeah, so my gut feel is that Vargas is the play there. And I don't have a ton of information to back that up other than some kind of rough things that I've been looking at. He's a guy that's 0-2 in the UFC. He really needs a win. He's 35. If he loses this fight, his fight career could be over. He lost a DQ in his last fight after he was ahead. So I feel like you got to throw that out. The fight before, he got controlled for the entire fight, but historically, he's been a really good finisher before he joined the UFC. He's never been knocked out. He's going against a 21-year-old kid making his UFC debut. I think Vargas is sort of interesting, but it's not necessarily based on anything great I've seen from him. It's more of a situational thing. But my gut feels Vargas is the play. Sekulic is coming off a 2.5-year layoff and a PED suspension, and I didn't think he looked that good anywhere, so I'm not that excited about Sekulic. But, I mean, who knows? Those are the types of guys that break slates. So you want to have a little bit of exposure. He's going to be super low-owned. Probably the best thing he has going for him. You got Anthony Smith. That's do plays get any grosser than that? Going against Jimmy Crute. Goddamn, Smith had a rough year in 2020, man. He is coming off a win, but he's coming off a win in his one easy fight, and now he's going back up to fighting elite competition. So I'm not excited about Anthony Smith, but in the back of my mind, it's he is also sort of the guy that would break a slate with a random triangle submission win or something.
Totally. Yeah, Smith's a guy. I mean, I don't know. It is super gross down there. But again, you're looking at ownership here. Smith 16%, 14% on FanDuel. Vargas 16% on DraftKings. Sekulic just 10%. I mean, we need low-owned fighters, right? And if you're gonna fade the main event underdogs, the title fight underdogs, these are guys you have to play. So a lot of them are just hold your nose. And as we've said in golf, as we said on this show before, if you can find just one reason to play a low-owned fighter, that's enough. So whether it's Sekulic's line move, whether it's Vargas playing unproven competition, whether it's I don't even know if I can find one for Anthony Smith, but if you can find one, then there's your reason to play him. So
he's been in a title fight. He's a former title fight contender.
There you go. That's your reason to play Anthony Smith, and there you go. So, all right. So you talked about Vargas' opponent, Rong Zhu, and we have a ton of new fighters on this slate, which we seemingly get a decent amount of on these pay-per-view cards. So for betting purposes, we need to know about them, and for DFS purposes, we obviously need to know about them. And the nice thing about it is, the betting lines are based off the same information all of us have. These tapes that we find, and for these 3 Chinese fighters making their UFC debuts, there isn't a ton of tape at all. So I can't say for sure how sharp the lines are, and I wouldn't even say with confidence that they are sharp. So if we're looking at these newcomers on this slate, Jake, we have the 3 Chinese fighters. We have Rong Zhu, we have Ori Qilang, and we have Liang Na. And then we have Pat Sabatini making his UFC debut, and we have Jeff Molina off the Dana White's Contender Series making his debut. So 5 newcomers for this card. Give me your brief thoughts on all 5 of these guys.
Yeah, man, it's a lot of new fighters. So I'll just go through them one by one. So I think Rong, he interestingly comes in as the biggest favorite on the slate to get a finish, which is kind of crazy for a 21-year-old kid making his UFC debut on a pay-per-view card with 13 fights. Which is part of why I like Vargas. But, I mean, it's hard not to look at those numbers a little bit and be like, damn, I mean, this guy has a 45% chance to get a finish. Like, that's pretty steep.
But again, that's based on everything you and I have seen. The bookmakers don't have any more information than we have. So I agree with you that I think it's incredibly high for a guy with limited tape.
Right. I mean, he has 15 finishes. He hasn't fought the toughest competition. Only one of his 16 pro wins has gone to decision. He's been submitted 3 times, which is sort of interesting. I mean, he seems to be a submission threat against him. But basically he's a finisher, but he's a young guy. Who knows? I mean, I feel like it's a super high variance fight right there. He could look really good or he could look really bad. And it's going to be hard to say until he actually gets inside the octagon because he just hasn't faced that much competition. And we haven't seen some of his recent fights. Then kind of going up the list, in the second fight of the night, we have Aori, and he's going against Molina, and that line actually flipped. Originally, Molina, it was basically a coin flip. It was 115 for Aori and negative 105 for Molina, and then it flipped where now Molina is negative 115. So the odds, the people are seeing something in the betting market to like Molina. He's coming off the Contender Series. He looked pretty good. It wouldn't have been a good DraftKings score. It was a 3-round decision. It wasn't super high volume, but it was like a better fight than the DFS thing. But he's been a finisher. Before that, he had like 7 straight finishes going up to the decision. He's kind of a submission threat, and now he's going against another guy with 3 submission losses, which is funny that both Rong and Aori both have 3 submission losses but have never been knocked out. I feel like that's probably something going on with the training over there. But Molina at 8,000 is kind of interesting. He's only $13 on FanDuel too, and Aori goes for a decent number of takedowns from the tape we saw. So I think he's even a little more interesting on FanDuel at $13. He looks like a really good value play, and at 8,000, he's kind of one of those mid-priced guys. I think Molina could get a submission here. I kind of like Molina. I'm not really big on Aori. When I initially looked at him, I kind of liked him, and then the more I saw, I was like, he's just sort of average.
I felt the same exact way, dude. Literally same exact thought process.
Yeah, I was excited at first, and then I watched more tape, and then you see his record. He's 18-6, but 11 of his wins have come in decisions. So I don't know. I'm kind of lukewarm on him. I'm not going to have very much. Though my favorite is actually in the first fight, and I think she's the highest variance play. And I think it could go terrible for her, or it could actually go really well. But that's Liang. Every fight she's in, she immediately shoots for a takedown. She doesn't even set him up, really, just immediate takedowns every time. And she's not very accurate with them, but she has an active enough guard that she seems fine getting reversed and ending up on her back, because I think 4 of her 7 submission wins have come by armbar. So she's totally fine to get reversed on that first attempt. She just wants to get the fight to the mat. She does not want to be standing up. And I'm pretty sure when she sees Carnelase, she's not going to want to stand up anymore. I mean,
if you haven't already, just Google a picture of Cornelosi, she's jacked. So yeah, I understand that.
She might be the most jacked fighter on this card, male or female. And she's only 5'2". And I'm pretty sure it's in the 115-pound weight class, and like 70 pounds of that is in her arms.
For sure.
I mean, it's crazy. So I really like that fight. I mean, I'm not sure Liang's gonna win, but I think that she's gonna force the action, which we can discuss that a little bit more in a little bit. But she's the one that I'm most interested in, both in targeting and playing, just because I think for DFS purposes, she's gonna come in and force the action. She's only been to one decision. All of her fights end in the first 2 rounds. I mean, that's just, I don't know what else to put it.
I mean, she just, like you said, she pushes the action, and she's trying to.
Yeah.
And against a fighter like Cornelossi, if she pushes the action, she either gets it to the ground or she's going to get KO'd. And there's a big reason why Cornelossi has a pretty high KO % chance, both in the model and in the betting market. So.
Right. I mean, how often do we see a female 115-pound female fight? She's a 45% chance to get a KO. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen that.
Yeah, man, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And that's a fight that we definitely want to target in DFS. And in the next couple minutes, we'll talk about some more high-risk fights that we want to target. Jay, can you stick around till 3:45 or so, or is that too late for you?
Yeah, that's fine, man. We got an extra hour or so because we did this thing a little bit earlier before lock.
Cool. So if you guys like what you're hearing so far, make sure you click that subscribe button below the video. Get access to all of our content when we release it or go live here on YouTube. Give us that thumbs up, show support, lets us know that you like this type of content. And again, if you want to join our Discord channel where Jake and all of us are chopping up about MMA and other daily fantasy sports, just click the join button right below the video. Get you access to our Discord channel. Let's see here. So we've talked about these new fighters. We've broken down the main events. So let's talk about some other fights we want to target. We already talked about the Cornelossi and Liang fight. Jake, any other fights that you're looking to target that you think can produce fireworks?
So I didn't really want to talk about it too much because it's the one that I'm targeting on the slate, which is the first fight when we were just talking about it. But that's the one I'm really interested in playing both sides. Normally there's 2 or 3, sometimes 4 fights where I'm really looking to play both sides of it. But ignoring the 5-round fights, this slate, not as much. I mean, you could make an argument on Hall Weidman, but I mean, I know as you're aware, I think Chris Weidman is terrible and washed up, so I'm not really interested in playing both sides of that, except maybe in cash where you can play Weidman. And now he's definitely going to get 10 takedowns and make me look like an idiot. But I mean, that guy's lost 5 of his last 7 fights. He's been knocked out in all 5, I believe. He's still riding his laurels from the 2013 Anderson win. I mean, there's some talk about him improving his training, but I feel like that's the story that always comes out on guys in their late 30s that have looked terrible. It's no. I'm my training, that was the issue. I'm still a title contender. Fuck out of here, Weidman. You're not a title contender.
He's talking about trying to fight Adesanya next.
Oh my god, yeah, dude. He literally he's been fighting guys in their late 30s since 2015, and now he's talking about being the best in the division. No, get out of here with that. I mean, the best thing he is going is he's facing another 36-year-old in Hall who's not very good either. So I mean, if Weidman faced a really good fighter, he would get absolutely destroyed.
So let's talk about it for a second because I think this is important because a lot of people who are listening to this, a lot of people who play MMA DFS are fight fans to start, right? They're UFC fans. They like breaking down the tape. They like predicting the outcomes of fights. But as we all know, daily fantasy sports is way more than just being a fan of the sport and knowing about the sport. And that's where something like Chris Weidman comes into play today. You and I both agree. Very gross play. I will admit our model does like Weidman a little bit today. However, if you're playing low-risk contests, this is the prototypical DFS pro play. A fighter who started the week as the underdog, finished the week as the favorite, and is now quote-unquote underpriced in DFS, and they are now cheaper than their opponent despite being the favorite. And when we see this, Jake, we see elevated ownership not only in low risk contests, and I think that's probably more important to have them there, but in high risk contests, it presents a very good leverage opportunity for someone like Hall, who's going to go lower owned because he's quote unquote not priced properly.
Totally. I mean, I actually love the line move in Weidman's favor because now we can get Hall low owned. Because it was kind of hard to find reasons to like Hall. Even when he's gotten a decent amount of KOs, but he's still scored poorly because he throws no volume, no takedowns, and all of his KOs have come in the later rounds. But, Weidman's been knocked out 5 times in the last 7. Maybe Hall gets an earlier KO. or more importantly, maybe Weidman shoots for 15 takedowns, misses 10 of them, and on FanDuel, Hall gets 10 takedowns defended in a round 3 KO. And that's where I'm really looking to play him, is on FanDuel.
Yeah, great play over there. We haven't talked about it yet, but sneaky MVP play as well with all those takedown defense possibilities. I mean, we looked at Petr Yan, right, on the last 3 title fight card. He had a billion takedown defense. He lost the fight and had like 130 FanDuel points.
He was still the optimal MVP on FanDuel with a round 4 DQ. I mean, how crazy is that?
I mean, it goes to show, how much those added takedown defense boost the score over on FanDuel. So, I mean, right here in the Daily Plug, which you can get access, it is fully free this week, occupyfantasy.com for those of you watching. Jake's write-ups, his favorite fights, his best bets, and his lineup strategies for FanDuel and DraftKings. In the high-risk top plays list, you also talk about top takedown defenders, because we do get that 3-point boost for every takedown defended on FanDuel. I mean, just another boost for Carnelossi, who, if Liang attempts as many takedowns as we think she has a possibility to rack up a couple of those before knocking her out. And then the fight we haven't talked about yet is Connolly and Sabatini. Give me your thoughts there on how that fight could play out.
Yeah, so Sabatini, we failed to touch on him. He's the last newcomer here, and he was actually supposed to fight in February against Alves, and Alves missed weight by like 35 pounds or something.
I forgot about that.
At the time, Sabatini was priced at like 7,200. He was a decent underdog. I actually really liked him going into that fight. It was a really tough matchup, but I mean, Sabatini is a really good wrestler, and the majority of his wins come by submission. This looks kind of like a tough matchup for him. I don't know if he gets the finish. I think it's going to be a good fight. Actually, kind of like Connolly too. He is coming off a long layoff and really intensive neck surgery. He had like a disc replaced. He was going through like really terrible pain. He lost a bunch of strength. So I'm a little worried about his recovery, but it sounds like he's fine. And both these guys looked absolutely shredded at weigh-ins. Mm-hmm. I mean, they probably were the best 2 looking at weigh-ins. So, I mean, who knows? I mean, we could see one of them really go off. If Sabatini wants to hit value, he's going to have to get a submission. If he doesn't get the submission win, he's not a good play. But he's really good at getting submissions. But the problem is Connolly's been like a really tough grinder. He fought his debut, short notice, at 170 pounds. This fight's at 145. He fought 25 pounds heavier in his debut against Michel Pereira, the crazy, Brazilian capoeira guy, doing backflips and just, I mean, Connolly was just like, what the hell? Yeah, he beat him in a decision. I mean, it was so wild. Like, Connolly looked two weight classes too small for that fight. I mean, it was nuts. Anyone that hasn't seen that fight, go check it out. Pretty ridiculous. I still don't know how Connolly won. Like, he was so much smaller and just ground out the decision. So he won my respect in that one. But we have seen the line move in Sabatini's favor. I think Sabatini could potentially come in even under his projected ownership just because he's expensive. He's hard to fit in. He's 8,800 now. Way more expensive than he was going to be in his first debut. But, the odds makers in the field like him. I mean, he's definitely a sneaky play in the slate. And he's always a threat to land a submission. He is a really good wrestler. So it'll just come down to how Connolly's takedown defense and submission defense can hold up.
Yeah, because you think about it, right? You can get a title fight favorite in Zhang Weili for $200 more on DraftKings. You can get Jimmy Crute, who, if you look at his DraftKings game logs, just explosion scores all around. Why would you play Sabatini, right? But like you said, he does have the highest money line of the trio at minus 245 as of the time of this video. So speaking of ownership, we hit it on it earlier. You have to have at least 2 low-owned fighters go off for you to win tournaments. I had probably more than that go off when I won the 100K a month or 2 ago. So, Jake, if we're looking at fighters, and I'm going to sort by projected DraftKings ownership in our model here. If we're looking at fighters 20% projected or lower, and we see this dynamic on title fights and on big fight cards where we'll see nearly half the field under 20%. So it gives us a lot of options to choose from. So, Jake, of the lowest owned fighters on the slate, who are a couple that you're targeting or who are your favorites for tournaments?
Yeah, so for the low-owned guys, there are kind of 3 that I'm looking at on DraftKings, and that's going to be Liang, Vargas, and Hall. They're all below 20%. I think they're all pretty solid. I do prefer Hall on FanDuel, but I still think he's in play on DraftKings. I think he could get an early KO. And I think maybe, he gets around 2 KO that still doesn't score great, but maybe a 95, 100-point round 2 KO would be enough. And I kind of like Connolly on FanDuel. We talked about how good a wrestler Sabatini is, but he also misses a lot of takedown attempts. So if Connolly can somehow grind out another decision win, he has the chance to get a lot of takedowns defended here. If he wins, it will almost have to come with a bunch of takedowns defended unless he gets a finish. And he does have a lot of finishes too. And he's only $10 on FanDuel, which is relatively, significantly cheaper than the $7,400 on DraftKings. So I think Connolly is kind of a FanDuel specific play, but if all the underdogs do fail on DraftKings, maybe another 85-point decision win as a value dog is still enough. So I don't hate him either.
Yeah, I think those are some of my favorite options as well. Where you'll really get low ownership is, again, similar to Sabatini. No one's going to pay up for Dwight Grant because you got Shevchenko, you have Usman right above him, you got Whaley right below him. And so we got Dwight Grant, despite his 43% projected finish chances, at just 18% projected ownership on DraftKings. So I think both sides of that fight are interesting. And again, we talked about it. The bottom, Sekulic is a super gross play. But Grant, could gas late. And again, like you said, a win of any sorts could get there if all three title fight favorites win. So any underdog win outside of that could get there. So I think Sekulic at 9% you have to play. Grant's interesting to me. What do you think? We haven't talked about this fight whatsoever. And we got about 9 minutes left here. But the Natividad Bakirel fight, which I'm pretty sure I butchered that name. I think that could be a little bit of a shootout, but we haven't talked about it much.
Yeah, no, good point. I actually love that fight, or at least half of it. I really like Batgirl. I'm not on Kevin Christmas. It's all Batgirl for me. So I really like him, man. He's got his last 3 wins came in the first round. Let me pull that up real quick just to verify. Yeah. So, all right. So he lost his debut in a decision, but this guy's last 3 wins have all come by round 1 finish, 2 KOs, 1 submission. Before that, he had a round 2 KO. I mean, he's a finishing machine. 6 of his 8 career wins have come early. He's a really good striker. I mean, if you watch his last fight, he didn't even wind up. He threw this kind of hybrid jab hook, caught the chin of his opponent and just dropped him. I mean, this guy's got good hands. 8,500. I mean, he's a good value play. That's one of my favorite plays in the mid 800. Him and Brendan Allen are the 2 guys in the mid 8Ks that I'm really looking at, other than Carnelossi. So I love all 3 of those in the mid 8,000s.
Perfect. So, like I said, we'll be here till 3:45. We're 7 minutes left until the end here. If you have any final questions about DFS, about betting for UFC 261, go ahead and hop in the chat. Let us know. We also want to know who you think will be the highest scoring fighter on the slate. So make sure you comment below the video with who you think the highest score will be. Maybe we'll give something away if someone gets it right. Don't say Usman. Come on. Go out on the limb and pick somebody else. So, Jake, let's talk about some bets. So, we normally do our parlay of the week. I'm actually going to bring up the plug. Your best bet section has been hitting at an outstanding rate. Nearly 40%, I think greater than 40% plus ROI over the last month in the best bets. So you've got a few here. Do you want to do our parlay first and then talk about some of your favorites, or do you want to influence me and talk about your favorites first and then do the parlay?
I mean, the way your picks have been going, we should probably talk about some bets before we put the parlay in.
Let's do it. All right, give me. You have about 20 or so bets listed here, but give me some of your favorites that stand out.
Yeah, so this week's a little bit tricky just in terms of, I would say the things I think are the most likely didn't have a ton of value in the lines. I really like Brendan Allen to get a submission, but his line's plus 195. I wish that was a little wider. I like Baccarella to get a KO. His KO line's 280, which is decent. I like his round 1 KO line at plus 700. That looks really strong to me. Let's see, what are some other ones that I really like? I kind of like both sides of the first fight of it ending early. The Liang round 1 sub is plus 1,200. 12 of her 13 finishes have come in the first round, and she's a submission specialist. So that seems a little wide. And the Carnelossi side at plus 500 for her round 1 KO. I mean, I think there's a good chance that one ends in round 1, and it's going to come from one of those 2. So plus 500 and plus 1,200, very likely that one of those hits. see what are some other ones. I mean, Crute inside the distance. I've seen it anywhere from -105 to +110. Kind of wish that was a little bit wider. You could look at his round one win line, which he normally wins in round one. It's +290. I kind of like the Hall round 2 and round 3 props, which have a little more value than his anytime KO line of +210. You can get round 2 KO at +850 and round 3 KO at +1200. The hard part is it's hard to say which of those hits, but I don't think he gets the first round KO, but I really like him to get a late round KO. So both of those are solid. I kind of, as another really long shot, I kind of like Randy Brown to bounce back with a round 3 sub. Again, it could come in round 2, but his round 3 sub line is +2500. His round 2 sub line is +2000, which, I don't think he never gets round 1 finishes, but he's pretty good about bouncing back from losses with the late finishes of his own. At least that's been his pattern his entire UFC career. So I kind of like those 2 lines, and Oliveira has been pretty susceptible. He's only been knocked out once, but he's been submitted 5 times. And then I mentioned it earlier, but I really like the Valentina Shevchenko round 2 submission line, which has been kind of moving around all week. It opened at +2600. It went up to +3000 where I got in. I've seen it as low as +1900 now, so people must be betting it. But all of her finishes have come in the second and third rounds throughout her career. And I don't really think she knocks Andrade out. Maybe it comes from ground and pound, but man, +3000, or if you can get it +2500, I still like Shevchenko round 2 submission line. I think that's a good one.
Yeah, and there's nothing like sweating out the 5 minute of a round prop. So
yeah.
So if you like that kind of action, definitely get in. And again, Jake's been hitting these at an astronomical rate, so be sure to get in. So now we got to go with our stream parlay. We're about 0 for 90 so far, which means we're just 1 away from being in the black. So Jake, I'm gonna start first, and I'm gonna say my favorite. Hold on, I gotta see what. Okay. So I'm kind of piggybacking off after your final analysis there. My first leg of the stream parlay is Shevchenko wins by submission +500.
I like that too. I mean, I think it's hard to guess. Round props generally aren't the way to go unless you can really narrow it down to 1 or 2. And I think it comes down to round 2 or 3, but she could get it in round 1. So I like backing up a little bit and getting the overall submission line there. And you were saying that was +500?
Yep, +500. So I'm obviously going to win it because I've hit every side of mine so far. So
you are so due, man. You got some variants coming your way. The other bet that I kind of like that I didn't mention was Jeff Molina submission at +600. I think that one's pretty decent. But for my leg of the parlay, I'm going to stick with Batgarel KO at +280. I think that one's a pretty good bet. Natividad, all of his losses, all 2 of them in his career have come by KO. He looked like he had a suspect chin in his last fight. I like Batgarel gets the KO, and I was kind of going back and forth whether to take the round 1, but let's back up a little bit. We need to hit one of these.
All right, so we got a +500, we have a +280. That's the official Occupy Fantasy MMA DFS stream parlay of the week. Go bet it where you can. And again, we're here till 3:45. So 2 more minutes, and we do have one final question in the chat, which I think will tie this all together nicely since we did talk about it 45 minutes ago. 730 BNLG production says, do you think we need one of the 3-round fights in our lineup? So I'm going to summarize our thoughts, and Jake, I'll let you finish it off here. If you're playing low-risk contests, 50-50s, double-ups, head-to-heads, on DraftKings, you want at least 1, maybe 2 fight stacks. So all 3 title favorites, 1 to 2 main event underdogs. On FanDuel, no need to play the underdogs unless you really want to, because there are so many mispriced favorites at $15 or below. That's your low-risk approach for both sides. Now, for tournaments, similar concept on FanDuel. However, I do think if at $15, if Namajunas wins, she's in the optimal lineup. And there are different ways because of the MVP structure on FanDuel that they don't get there. But you still probably need at least 1, definitely, but probably 2, maybe 3 on FanDuel. On DraftKings, we talked about the field is definitely going to have a lot of 3 title fighters in their lineups. And we think the leverage is either playing just 2 or playing 2 underdogs and 1 favorite. But to answer your question, you 100% need at least 1 in your lineup. Jake, if I missed anything or if you have any clarifications, let me know.
No, I think you nailed it. That covers everything.
Perfect. So Again, if you liked what we talked about today, make sure you click that subscribe button right below this video. Get access to all of our live streams and our uploaded content. And as soon as they're released here on YouTube, we always appreciate that. Give us a thumbs up. Shows us that you like this type of content so we continue doing more of it. We do these live streams 3 to 4 times per week for MLB, UFC, PGA, and sometimes NBA. So be sure to check that out. If you want to join our Discord channel, chop it up with us and other OccupyFantasy.com members, you click the join button right below this video, OccupyFantasy.com/Discord with instructions. And if you like what you've seen on screen, OccupyFantasy.com is where you get access to the daily plug, access to the Occupy model for rankings, projected ownership, fight write-ups, and FanDuel and DraftKings lineup strategies. And again, that's fully free this week. Normally, you need to be a member to read it. Fully free this week. And then Jake, he is the owner of MMA DFS.com. So Jake, plug your site and your work there.
Yeah, so I've been doing it for like the last 9 or 10 months. So, you said the name, MMA DFS.com. We literally break down every single fight. We've got bets, we've got odds, we kind of do context, we do background of the fighters. Then we have the archive, which is super useful. It's every single past sheet. You can go back, check out the archive. You can see the odds from past fights. You can see the ownership. You can see the breakdowns. You can judge how well we did. I mean, we're not hiding anything. It's all up there. So all of our work is in the archive, which I even use that a lot, and I have like the same stuff on the, my computer that I could look at, but it's easier to look in the archive for me to just go look at stuff. So it's super useful to check that out.
Yeah, again, I say this every week, perhaps the most useful part of MMADFS.com. I reference it every single week, especially for tournaments, to figure out what people did and how fighters looked before the fight started and not try to be too results oriented. So you can follow us on Twitter at DFS_MMA for Jake. I'm at Brian Jester FF. We're at Occupy Fantasy on Twitter. Appreciate everyone listening. Good luck tonight. Enjoy UFC 261. Cool. We're good.